good morning, everybody, and welcome to this partnership webinar with IOSH and IOM, where we will be tackling the question, taking action today to secure your workforce for tomorrow. So I am Michelle Reid. I am the Director of Performance, Culture and Delivery at IOM. I am delighted to be joined by Stuart Hughes, the Head of Health and Safety for Mercedes, and also Rebecca Canham, our wonderful Principal Scientist for Human Factors and Psychology. Both Stuart and Rebecca are here with me today, and we'll be sharing our insights, our knowledge, and our thoughts with you in what we hope is a practical and pragmatic sense, but also backed up with science and insights to help you go back to your organisations and really think about what it is that you can do in your day-to-day. So without any further ado, I am going to start our conversation now with Rebecca and Stuart. So thank you both for joining me today. The first topic that we have is very interesting and very close to my own heart. And I think it's something that as practitioners and organisations we can forget. And that is the direct correlation between a healthy workforce and a profitable organisation. So I think what I would like to do is actually start with you, Stuart, because you're here as a health and safety professional. And sometimes what we can do in organisations is have things sitting in silo rather than understanding the direct correlation, but also forgetting that it's the people in our organisation that do the work, right? So for them to be able to do the work, then they need to be in an environment where they feel safe, their performance can be optimised, and that they have the processes and the systems and the kit, the tools, whatever it may be, to be able to perform well. So can I ask you to give us your view on the direct correlation between a healthy workforce and a profitable organisation, please?
Yeah, Michelle, thank you very much. And it's nice to see this joint webinar happening. You've just spoken all of my language, really. So I am a health and safety professional. My day job, I look after the health and safety of all the men and women in the Mercedes Formula One team. And I suppose it's quite unusual for me because I started there 9 years ago, and I started in a role that was directly in HR, reporting into the Chief People Officer. To probably have removed some of those silos that might exist in other organisations by being kind of, I suppose, in that structure. And I think, from a general perspective, I think you have to look at the top of this and say, right, how much does ill health and poor well-being cost industry? And if you look at something like the World Economic Forum, they say that annually we're probably losing something like $530 billion worth of kind of loss through poor health. And that reflects everything from the environment to how mentally safe we feel, kind of psychologically safe within our operations, but also how well we care for our people. And I think this care piece is like intrinsically linked to performance. And there's studies out there that will really demonstrate actually that return on investment. So where you're demonstrating that care for employees, it actually is driving enhanced employee engagement, and that's actually driving increased productivity, and ultimately increased productivity is helping to drive the bottom line. And I think
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know as an HR professional and the people that are here as well, let's just take a moment for you to repeat that stat that you gave. Give that stat again.
Okay, so I'll do the cost, which is we're losing about $530 billion a year globally from
so there's health. $500 million globally. What is it
in the billions, actually?
Yeah, well, yeah. So what is it that most organisations want to do? They want to be able to reduce costs. Money. They want to be able to increase profits. And actually, again, that whole linking the numbers to the human story in an organisation is something that I think we don't necessarily do really well. So I just wanted to reiterate that fact there. Thank you. Carry on.
No problem. And I think, look, if I take my day-to-day environment, our bottom line is time on the track, it's performance. So everything I look at from a health and well-being perspective has a performance lens through it. And that's the narrative that everybody can attach themselves to. What we've worked out over the last kind of probably 5 years of calibration, as we've been doing really enhanced kind of human performance activity in the under the broad umbrella of wellbeing, is that every department's slightly different, every individual is slightly different, and actually you can't kind of create this blanket approach that wraps everybody in it. And actually doing targeted interventions, looking at your employee engagement survey, identifying where there are potential challenges, and then bringing people together to discuss those, to identify some of the hypotheses of what they think is causing them challenges, to really interrogate that, and then to work with them to almost create their own kind of prescriptions or recipes, if you will. And actually then you get this real good buy-in of collectively we've designed some of these mechanisms that we're going to employ to either enhance our recovery or to look at our physical health, or to actually try and improve our cognitive function within a team by reducing distractions. Everybody buys into those solutions because they're co-created by the group of people that they apply to. And what we've found is that when you take that approach to looking at health and well-being, on top of what you do as an organization, from the safety elements in terms of looking at controls and mitigating risk, providing an environment that supports the activities that you're trying to achieve, plus the employee engagement and co-creation of those solutions, what we find is that actually that's the thing that moves the needle for us the most, because there's a sense of ownership, there's a sense of accountability to doing those things. And then what we tend to see is as people see the reality of the change or the progress, they kind of double down on it. So we get more engagement in the system because they see the elements that are working, and then that reflects back out in our employee engagement survey.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Just a couple of bits in there to reiterate. You've spoken a lot there about connecting with people, understanding the story, working with them to create the solutions. And I think the challenges for some organisations and for practitioners, and I can include myself in this historically and with experience, is that we think we need to come up with them all, and we do to people rather than actually work with them. And I know that this is a subject that's very close to Rebecca's heart, and her and I are very aligned on it. So I'm very excited to invite you now, Rebecca, to share your thoughts within that, because that is absolutely I know that that's your passion. So please come in and add your thoughts, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. I mean, just the mere mention there of co-creation got me giddy and excited. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything that's been said there. I mean, my background as a qualitative researcher, ultimately I cannot emphasize enough the value brought from actually engaging with the individuals impacted and affected by whatever it is we're trying to do. So in terms of that wellbeing piece, absolutely, and it's at across different levels of the organisation. The more that we can engage with the workforce, and at the coalface, but also middle managers. The role of the line manager is so important and essential as a pivotal post in terms of cascading and exchanging messages upwards, downwards, and across. There's a real need to absolutely co-design these initiatives, and there are a number of different kind of approaches and structures that you can that are openly accessible on the web nowadays anyway, that you can broadly put your best foot forward with. And it absolutely, the bit that therefore makes the difference and lifts things off the page for the workforce within an organization is the relativity. It's speaking their language, it's understanding their direct challenges, it's the work environment that they're living and breathing. And therefore the best way to kind of put that personalization, if you like, on it is to do a co-designed approach. So actually engaging with the workforce. And I think even organizations that do that well often tend to forget that bit at the end. And it's almost that, how do we close the feedback loop? So there's a number of organizations, and our research in IOM has supported that too, in terms of the number of organizations that are actually engaging, consulting. So whether that's a pulse survey, whether that's a culture survey, whether that's sort of conversations with line managers that are cascaded up on a regular basis through the management chain. But those sorts of things are great, but it's sort of that feedback and input often disappears into a black hole. And again, I think the temptation, which is really valuable, is if you can put yourself in the role of a worker wherever within your organization and kind of go, well, actually, I've fed into this survey, or this comes out every 6 months or every year, and I'm repeatedly putting information in, and seemingly it disappears in a black hole. So it's so important equally as part of that co-design approach to make sure that you're almost feeding that information back out again. Why was it valuable? What did we do with it? How have we considered it? And therefore, what are we looking to try and take action on moving forward? And absolutely that momentum that Stuart then touched upon, it becomes sort of self-perpetuating. People have a vested interest to succeed at something they've helped to create in the first place. So absolutely, yeah, most definitely.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my pragmatic and practical approach to all of what you've said, because I 100% agree with everything. I think it can be it can be quite confusing, and it can be quite challenging when you're sitting in an organisation to go, well, how do I evidence this? How do I talk the language of business? How can I get the people that I'm working with, or the leaders in the organisation, or whoever it is, whether it's a line manager, an employee, a CEO, an ops director, whoever it is in your organisation, how can I engage with them and get them to see that correlation? And I just want to share, I'm in the same as Stuart, I'm going to share a stat. So the HSE has said that 1.8 million working people suffer from a work-related illness, of which 875,000 workers suffer from work-related stress. Work-related stress, depression or anxiety, and 473,000 workers suffer from a work-related musculoskeletal disorder. Now, you don't necessarily need to take those stats and bring them into your organisation, but what you can do is you can go, well, if those stats are there, and people like the CIPD or Deloitte or some of the other research stats that are out there, you know, the Centre for Economics and Business Research, whoever it is, put a number on that. You can then go back to your organisation and go, well, how many sick days have we had? Do we understand what the reasonings are behind that? Or even just at a basic level, if we know that we have had, you know, 10% sickness in the last year, and we know what our average hourly rate are, then we can very easily do a very simple finance calculation. And I am not a finance person in any way, shape, or form, so I do advise you to make best pals with your finance team. But actually, you can go, well, if it's X by X, there's a number that's missing work every day. So if your organisation wants to achieve £3 million profit, or they want to reduce costs by 10%, or they want to increase productivity by 10%, then there's your first language of business. Well, we're currently losing X amount through sickness, and actually we can see from the return to work interviews or the information that we've gathered from the people around the organisation that it's to do with mental health, or it's physical disorders, or it's something else. That then gives you the information to then decide where do you invest and how do you engage with workers. With your organisation and with your workers. And as Rebecca and Stuart have both said, co-creation is everything. So it doesn't have to be a fancy engagement survey. It doesn't have to be anything massive. You can do a Microsoft form or a Google sheet and ask people to fill something in, whether it be overtly or confidentially, whichever way. You can even get templates very easily from organisations, and also on a search. Don't try and think that it's too complicated and that you don't know. Go to what you know and translate that into your language of business would be my practical part, because that is how you're going to prove that correlation. Now, don't worry about the fact that you might not be able to prove that your solution will work, because that's impossible. But do something rather than nothing. And
I'll just add to that, Michelle.
Business to buy in is helpful. Sorry, Stuart, on you go.
Just to add to that, I think there's a couple of things where health becomes challenging, and one is that most health things aren't immediately acute. They're kind of chronic, and they're a bit further down the path, and humans don't really think about 20, 30, 40, 50 years time in the future. It's a bit too long distance for us to really wrap our heads around. But actually the compound interest of what you do today and tomorrow and the next day, and the consistency of that, is the stuff that really starts to it's kind of like credit in the bank, and that grows from a health perspective. And what I would say is, and we've done this, we tried some things with small groups and they didn't work. And, you know, we kind of just went, okay, well, that we've tried that and that hasn't kind of taken off for whatever reason. At least we know that that doesn't work in that environment. we can try something else. And we've tried other things where you think, I'm not quite sure that this is going to land very well, but the kind of science out there, or the neuroscience or the research, says it's a very useful tool. So mindfulness being an example. And we took a series of leaders through an 8-week mindfulness course, and our anticipation was by the end of week 2, 90% of people will have given up on this. They'll think it's mumbo jumbo and away they go. And they stuck with it. And sometimes your organization and the people in it will surprise you with what lands. And I think that idea of short kind of almost like conditioning tests of seeing whether something works in a trial period before you expand it out is a really helpful way to start somewhere, to do something, and then to be able to see if you can grow it. And I think sometimes we look at health as a whole and it becomes such a biggie that we kind of get this inertia. And I think, just to back up what you were saying there, just to kind of get yourself over the inertia, run some trials of stuff, see what lands, see what really works with people. And what you generally tend to find is this peer-to-peer appreciation. So they kind of go, oh, you look a bit brighter. You look at like what's happened, have you been away? And you're like, oh no, actually I've been doing this mindfulness course. And then somebody else goes, how do I get a bit of that?
The ripple effect is amazing.
Yeah.
The ripple effect is amazing. And I think sometimes we can be affected by the fact, it's an HR thing or it's a health and safety thing, rather than actually being an us thing. So pilot groups and co-creation, as you've talked about, are exceptionally powerful. And it's not being paralysed by the fact we don't know the answers and we want a one-size-fits-all or a silver bullet approach, because there isn't one, and that's okay. That's okay. Thank you so much for that. The next topic that we have, and it ties in very nicely and flows very nicely, is how investing in employee wellbeing can enhance your workforce's skills and productivity. Now, if I may, I'd be very grateful if I could just give my initial thoughts on this and then hand over, and I'll probably start with you, Rebecca, and then come to Stuart. So for me, there's a piece here about understanding and meeting your organisation where it's at. So wellbeing is quite a big thing and can mean lots of things to lots of different people. And the first thing to really do is to understand your organisation and where they're at. And wellbeing isn't all about giving people free fruit, or, as Stuart's very helpfully talked about, a wellbeing course. It really starts with the foundations. So you need to make sure that your organisation has a really strong purpose, or that purpose is understood by the individuals that are there, that you have a really good strand of the basics in place. So actually, do people understand their role, what contribution that they can actually bring, the responsibilities and their expectations? Do they have the right processes and systems and skills to be able to carry out that work that's there? And rather than trying to jump to the next shiny new toy or what's out there that's been talked about on social media or in our networking groups, actually just ask yourself the questions, where is my organisation at now? Because more often than not, having a 3-value approach in your organisation can be really helpful. And that's the way that I look at things. So my core purpose within my organisation is to unlock the potential of people to realise commercial success. So it's connecting the human story to the numbers and ensuring that our people feel valued. So do we understand how valued they actually feel? Do they understand what value that they contribute? And actually, do they understand the value that they actually receive? And that is the first starting point. Then you can start to work up and add more in that's really going to add value and give a return on. So, Rebecca, I'll come to you next if you don't mind. So it's really about how investing in employee wellbeing can enhance your workforce skills and productivity. Give us your view.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a piece of work recently for a client that we ran some semi-structured interviews with organisational leaders, and there was definitely an undertone message in there that why are we necessarily trying to distinguish between work-related well-being and health versus everything generally in daily life? Inevitably, the two are connected. And therefore, I think increasingly there's a realization that investing in employee well-being sets people up for life. And that's something that actually they can carry into other elements of their life. They take it home, and it supports with family setups, and it can support with, you feel better able to support your other half, or but equally there may well be stresses, traumas, and other challenges to health that occur outside of the workplace, and inevitably that stays on your mind and you bring it back into the workplace. So I think things along the lines like Stuart has mentioned already, mindfulness, resilience, techniques, relaxation techniques, little things like that can make a huge difference. I think, though, when it comes to investing in employee well-being, I think the other assumption that organizations often make is that there needs to be a huge pot of gold thrown into this, and there absolutely doesn't.
No.
A lot of it is and we see a lot of clients come to us who aren't necessarily making best use of the data that they already gather, and therefore it's panning back in that bigger picture and going, what does this tell us? What does this mean? And again, like we touched on the sort of cumulative side of things, how are things changing over time, and is there a particular spike, whether that's a time of year or a particular department, and that allows you to really zone in and target the resource. And I say resource because it isn't just the investment of money, it's the investment of time and attention and consideration. But it allows you really to target where that can have best impact for, again, your organization, the makeup of your workforce. So I think that's really important to think about. And the other thing is that there's not necessarily a need to reinvent the wheel. If something is out there, there's so many freely accessible tools that you can kind of download and have a best start with. And as Stuart says, there will be an element of trial and error, but actually you can get a long way off the ground based on what you already collect that's telling you, useful information about your workforce and where their challenges may be. And it can be little things. I mean, within IOM, we have on a regular basis sort of a half an hour walking lunch where colleagues within the Edinburgh office get together, and it's a walk and talk, and it's a debrief, and it helps teams gel together. It's bridging the gaps between different departments because it's not team specific, and it gives you that social support and connectivity with your peers, along with absolutely half an hour to physically move your body, but get out and away from those walls that otherwise, the temptation can be to just continue at your desk. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge investment of money. It's the consideration of the setup and how you can support people, I think, in different ways that inevitably then brings the return with regards to those transferable skills within work and outside of work, but also ultimately will boost the productivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we tie ourselves up in knots because we really think that it has to be something really formalised. It needs to cost a lot of money.
And tailored and bespoke to us, and we've got to create something new. Absolutely. Most companies are 50% there.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a very small organisation that operates across the UK. We're a charity. We don't have a lot of money at all. And it's really just getting creative. You will have benefits that you already offer to people. So, I remember when I first joined here, we had a death and service benefit and an income protection benefit, but nobody had inquired about what other things came with that. Well, so we ended up with a wellbeing platform that cost me nothing more because actually it's given to us as part of these benefits. Things like our remote GP given to us as part of those benefits. Nobody had even promoted them. So I looked like a superhero because it looked like I was given all of this stuff. But it was there anyway, but nobody had asked the question or been curious or, pushed some of the things that are there. And there are some brilliant free tools that are out there as well. But signposting and engaging with managers so that they know what tools are there and that the business partner technical support that they have when there is something going on as well is quite useful. And sure, I'll come to you now because obviously Mercedes Formula One, have to say, big Formula One fan, it looks like on the TV it's a well-oiled machine. I imagine that it's quite a big organisation, so I'm really interested in your view here on what we've been saying.
Yeah, I think it is a well-oiled machine,
it really
and it's. We're not a giant organisation. I'd say we're like a medium-sized organisation, and we do manufacturing is the way I look at it. We just make some fancier toys, and probably have like some stuff that's a bit more interesting than your average manufacturing environment. But ultimately, we've got a lot of people that are very interested in data, very interested in performance, and very interested in the value that your pounds bring you, particularly in the new cost cap environment where the teams are limited on the spending. And so it's things like the Deloitte kind of paper that came out earlier this year that says, when you invest £1 in your mental health and wellbeing elements, that can return you £4.75. So you all of a sudden, like, when you're talking to people to say, actually, like, we want to drive performance through the people that work in the organization, when we invest this, we're getting, a 4 to almost five-fold return on the investment if it's done in a meaningful way. That actually gets people excited about it. And I think the other thing that we, really want to do is we really want to enable people to operate at their best. And some of that stuff you can do in a very free or kind of cost limited way. So, the impact of hydration on your concentration, for example. So just generally doing campaigns on enabling people to understand that their habits have an impact on their daily performance. They all want to perform to the best of their ability. We don't have anybody that turns up to work that doesn't want to do a great job. So how can we help them really enhance that? Things like taking a break, moving around the office, walking up and down a flight of stairs just to elevate your heart rate. Actually, that then ticks into your kind of your brain function, and you're activating more of your system. And it's these things that when you kind of talk to people about, that they don't necessarily equate to driving performance in their work environment. They're thinking about what is their output, what is their deliverable, what's their contribution. And we're saying, actually, through the health and wellbeing, we can fundamentally enhance your additional element to the team. And we do that by focusing on people's physical health. We do it by focusing on how we support people from a mental wellness perspective. And then we also talk about recovery. It's an intense environment. It's an intense season. It's got longer, less breaks. And actually, how do you enhance recovery in an environment that's high pressure? And those are the kind of skills. And I think Rebecca mentioned resilience. We talk about resilience skills, and we talk about actually it broader than just the workplace. Yes, we want the best out of people in the work environment, but ultimately we've got this kind of social sustainability agenda that actually, if you come and be an employee with us, we want to absolutely help you maximize the best out of yourself, but also be useful back into society, to your family, to your loved ones, to whatever your kind of circumstances are. And that, I think, when you start to unpack it a bit more and say it's not just about the work environment, this isn't just something to help me thrive, in the 9 to 5 or whatever your work hours are. This is about me maximizing my contribution collective, as a collective back to society as well. And that's where I think wellbeing really has this room to kind of blossom and grow. And I think there's also I think Harvard came out with something that basically said you can kind of, with meaningful wellbeing initiatives, you can drive productivity increases by up to about 10%. Now, I haven't met an operations person that doesn't want a 10% increase in productivity. So, when you actually kind of go and start to have that conversation, and they think you're kind of pulling the wool over their eyes because they don't really quite believe it. But you start to demonstrate it. You start to see, the increased engagement from the employees. You start to see that we've got groups of people that, they'd never done anything really from a kind of physical exercise perspective, and they've kind of found each other and they've formed groups and they're out running, and then they bring more people on, and you see people physically change in front of you over time, and it inspires other people to do it. And that for me, I think, is where you can go, right, we're not talking, there's some bits we spend, a good proportion of money on where we want either specific support or we want to run a kind of campaign and help people understand through blood work their vitals and kind of really in-depth stuff. But we also do really simple things like we've got a gym on site. We brought a blood pressure monitor for people. Periodically we go around and just do interim blood pressure clinics for people. And even just something like that will just help somebody understand how they're dealing with their stresses and their kind of physical condition. And that's simple. It's not an expensive mechanism. And I think this is where you need the balance of these things are. You can give people information, you can use the free tools, like you say, and you can help people inspire each other to make changes. And everyone's journey is different.
I think I would totally agree with that. I mean, we do monthly learning with all of our employees, and we have e-learning and in-person activities that happen each month. So we've encouraged this learning cycle with people, and we embed some personal care, wellbeing, mindfulness, very simple modules within that people then talk about, and encourages them to do it. And it also gives that psychological permission that it's okay, and that it's not all about churn and work, but actually understanding that correlation there. And I was really interested in that stat that you gave about investing £1 gets you £4 back, right? Now, that's where you can really start to think about in your organization, what are the most meaningful investments? And that can be quite difficult because you might not know. But going back to the first talking point, it's about look at your data. So if you have people, if your sickness or your retention or your recruitment is a challenge, then actually look at what people have told you within that, or go and ask people the questions, and actually they'll give you the answers. And I think I get laughed at quite a lot because people will say to me, oh, you know quite a lot. I actually don't. I'm winging it with intent. And when I say intent, it's because actually we ask our people, we understand what it is that they're looking for. And if there's a trend out there, or multiple people are saying the same thing, then that has to trigger something in you to go, well, actually, there must be something in this. Let's help that and be a champion behind it, but not necessarily do two people actually co-create what that looks like. Our wellbeing walk wasn't created by HR. It was something that was started by someone who was interested in it and who has kept that going. We've got a group of people who do 15 minutes exercise, walking exercise, a couple of days a week, that anyone's invited to join. It costs absolutely nothing because it's a free YouTube video. So there are lots of things that are very, very low cost, but you can also then invest where you're able to do so in areas that would really give you a bit of a return. And we are going to give you a gift. So on the back of this webinar, some of the stats and the research that's been done, we're going to give to you. So you don't have to look for it or remember what it was that was there. So you'll get these links and things from us as well as the recording. So you can just literally pick them up and use them and follow your nose and talk to your people internally. Now, we've done a lot of talking, and we do have a Q&A function and we do have a chat function, and we haven't seen anything yet. So I'm taking that we're giving you a lot of information and you're reflecting on it, which is lovely. But I would like to invite anyone who is interested in sharing their experiences or anything that they would like to ask or contribute. So I'll just give a little minute to see if anyone wants to come forward before we move on to the next topic. I'm keeping a very close eye on the chat and the attendees.
Yeah, don't be shy. I think if you're thinking of a question, somebody else will be thinking of a question, and all it takes is someone to ask it, and we can.
No judgment here, and there's no silly question other than the one you don't ask.
I was going to say it could be a question equally. I would say, we're all kind of here to learn from one another, and therefore, if anyone's got a bit of a knowledge share themselves of something that's maybe worked, then I think it's really helpful to kind of bring that out and showcase that too. If there's a high level example anyone's got that they want to bring.
Yeah, and as a reminder, you can raise your hand using the reactions, or you can put it in the chat or the Q&A function. So we haven't had anyone that's taken us up on our offer just now, so we can move on to the next topic and then ask and open up at the end again. So our last topic of discussion is strategies to retain top talent by fostering safe and healthy work environments. And as an HR practitioner, the war for talent, I would say, is greater than it's ever been. But I would caveat that by saying it's not any different than it's ever been. And it's really interesting, some of the thought processes and the insights from other people in my network about this. We've always had this challenge about making sure we have top talent in our organizations, keeping them there, supporting that, managing performance in people, and getting that balance right. So that's not really new to us as HR practitioners, but we are in a little bit of a new world, particularly after the pandemic, and where people have kind of reassessed their lives, and new styles of jobs or activities have come up, or people have really thought differently about their work and what matters to them. So I'm really interested to hear, and I'm going to come to you, Stuart, first, about your advice or your experiences around retaining top talent and by fostering this safe and healthy work environment.
Yeah, and I think that I'll just kind of put my IOSH presidential hat on for this side of things first off. I think I don't disagree with what you've said. I think what we've got now is we've got a greater generation span within the workforce than we've ever had, and that seems to be increasing. And they've all got slightly different nuances and needs. And we've got people that want to be with organisations for quite a long period of time. We've got people that are coming in and expect to be there for a year or two and move, and a year or two and move, and build that way. And I think it's the same challenges, but kind of a slightly different context, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. And I think one of the things that we've seen as IOSH is this groundswell, I think, in appreciation for health, safety and wellbeing. And it starts with the ILO and the fact that a healthy and safe work environment is now a fundamental principle and right at work. And what that basically means is it's a fundamental human right. So that's now applicable in the vast majority of countries across the globe. So all of a sudden there's now an obligation to make these things happen. And it's done with the right intent, because as we've discussed, where we sadly lose life and where we lose people, certainly from employment, it's either through poor management or it's through poor environments that are damaging people, and people don't want to stay under poor management or in a poor environment. And I think that, for me, the things that we can do within this is actually look at that, right? What is the environment that we provide? How is it that we're enabling our workforce to thrive? And what are the things that we are doing to enable this kind of cross-generational understanding? Because there's knowledge and learning at all of these parts, and there's people that have developed skills and coping mechanisms to deal with doing the job that can share that experience with people that are coming in and maybe struggling or finding challenge. I think the biggest thing that we've got now is people talk about this stuff far more openly. So actually we've got greater depth of knowledge and understanding in the workplace than perhaps we've ever had before. And then I think, we've been speaking a lot about cost, haven't we? And like, fundamentally, if you bring somebody into your organization and you train them up, you're investing in them. And if you can't keep them because you haven't created that environment where they feel secure, where they feel aligned to the purpose, and actually they feel like they're contributing, or they leave. And every time they leave, you're not just reinvesting in the new individual, but you're also then you've lost that previous investment, and then you're having to pour more money on top of with the training and the development, etc. And I think this is where we need to address the issues. How do we draw people in? How do we become the people that employees want to come and work for? And what is it that sets us apart? Well, lots of people can have a nice fancy building, great. Lots of people can have an interesting wellbeing program, but actually what are the things that fundamentally demonstrate you care about the human beyond just what they're delivering for you as your organization? I think if you can hit that sweet spot, then you stand like head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Rebecca, I'm going to come to you and then I'll give my view at the end of that, because it reiterates a lot of what we've been saying already, but I'm really keen for your view as well, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say I've got a few statistics to be thrown out myself, if that's okay. So
carry on.
There was some work from Gallup that indicated that companies with a high employee engagement have 41% lower absenteeism, as well as 59% lower turnover rates. And that is pretty staggering, really, as a statistic. But we also touched on sort of that extending working lives as well, and I think there's an element of flexibility that comes in. So another study found that 80% of employees would be more loyal to their employers if they had the opportunity to work more flexibly, or they had greater flexible work options. And I think in particular, some of the research that we've done at IOM with sort of extending working lives into later life, and that flexibility where you've potentially got, we've touched upon sort of chronic health conditions and those sorts of things. You also potentially have additional care responsibilities as you're entering sort of later life. So I think in particular there is a trend for older workers to want that almost flexibility, and that could be flexibility in terms of role. So it could be moving somebody's role from a more sort of manual perspective into something that's a little bit lighter, so that they don't feel de-skilled and they're still able to contribute in that workforce. It could be, flexibility around work location. It could be flexibility around shift patterns or working hours. And again, I know obviously within IOM, we have a lot of options and a lot of colleagues, myself included, that work very flexibly. But what that gives, certainly from my perspective, is when I'm at work, 100% of me can be at work, and I can really throw myself into everything that I'm doing, because I know I haven't got to manage, children or other care responsibilities or other bits and pieces. Everything works well for me, which means when I'm not at work, I throw myself into everything else. But when I am at work, it gives me that freedom and almost my permission from myself to be concentrated and focused and sort of wear a different hat. So I think it's considerations again, depending on, and it's knowing your workforce and individuals, what their preferences are, as well as, what works for the business. And in reality, I think particularly from a flexible working angle, there certainly was an element of fear around, well, what impact will that have on productivity? Whereas actually the statistics are out in that it helps retain people, it keeps people happy and feel valued at work. And a lot of the work that we've done more recently into sort of wellbeing strategies being rolled out in different industries and sectors, the key message that kind of came through for us was that we want to make sure that our employees feel valued. So companies are working quite hard to understand, well, how do we go about doing that? And I think the concept of value is different, both generationally and, for different individuals culturally. So it really is unpicking and understanding the workforce makeup that you have, along with practically what are you able to offer. And if there's not a reason not to offer it, then why aren't you? So I think it's almost changing mindsets, and COVID has helped us in that way to show a different way of working. But I think it's got to be a balance between, what works for the individuals within that organization and practically the organizational operations and purpose that they're there to fulfill.
I think I would agree wholeheartedly with everything that you guys have said. And, the generational argument is a really interesting one. So sometimes we can be quite fearful of enabling someone to do something for their own needs in case that sets a precedent or, puts a consistency factor. But actually, it's about understanding your business, understanding the best route of getting value from that individual. We're very lucky. We have some extraordinary people in our organization, people that are well into their 70s, right? So, our oldest employee that we have in the organization is 79. Up until last year, he was still working full time. He's only just recently went part time, mainly to satisfy his lovely other half at home, to be fair. But we were able to have a brilliant conversation with him to say, what is it that you what is it that you want to do? What parts of your role would you rather not be doing? Because that then opens up an opportunity for other people in the organization to learn and develop and to grow with this mentoring experience still in the organization. And it's not about people picking and choosing. It's about going, where can I maximize strengths and where can I open up opportunities? And even bringing new people into the organization or younger people into the organization, the dual mentoring approach is absolutely brilliantly. They started to learn with their fingers the minute that they were born. Technology is absolutely institutionalized into their life from the minute that they are able to do so. So that quick learning, that curiosity, all of that kind of stuff can really help you to improve systems or processes or, just enhance that curiosity, but give that knowledge to other people in the organization as well. So when you've got change programs happening, or you're adapting technology, that actually there is a psychological safety there within the organization where people can go, I'm struggling, I need a bit of help, or I've got an idea, I'd love to share it. So fostering that ability for people to feel valued, to feel like they contribute, and that they're part of something bigger rather than just coming to work for a salary. Because the fallacy that money is the ultimate motivator isn't actually true. Of course, it's a hygiene factor. People need to have the financial ability to be able to live, but it's not. There's an interesting stat from the CIPD where a lot of organisations are increasing and raising salaries on hard to fill vacancies. But what they're not actually doing is looking at, well, why are they hard to fill in the first place? Because if the management style is not great, if the environment or the systems are not great for people, you can throw as much money at it as you want. You're just going to continually lose. And the CIPD as well said that the cost of replacing a junior employee, so we're only talking junior employees here, right? Roughly about 25k, is around £30,500. Now, what organisation out there wouldn't want to save £30,500? And this goes back to the point at the beginning of the session here. Talk the language of business. What is your turnover rate? Where is it across different departments that you have? Is there something in there that helps you understand what it is that is causing that, or that could improve that? And again, go out to your people and talk to them about what do they enjoy about work. So I've got four favourite questions that I ask regularly. What do you enjoy about work and why? If it was your organisation, what would you ditch and why? So what is it that actually frustrates you? If you could change anything, what would it be and how? And the last one is, what's in your way? Because normally that then writes your plan and your activity. And Rebecca's point at the very beginning about the feedback loop, it's really important to go, you said we did, you said we're not because, or you said we can't and here's why. You don't have to give everybody everything because it's physically impossible, but it's just really understanding that and keeping that conversation going. I think it's really important to understand your organisation as a whole, not just your top talent, but also your people in your organisation who are core and fundamental to things that you're doing, but also making sure that you're managing the performance of those who are not engaged, who are potentially toxic, who actually need to be given a helping hand to move on to something that would make them happier or would be better placed for them. So actually managing imbalance is really important. And again, I would go back to saying foundations are important. Don't get distracted by the next shiny thing. Don't get distracted by the fact that it has to be something quite big. Just start at your basics, talk to your people and really meet your organisation where it actually is. Stuart, have you got anything else that you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think just on the feedback loop, the feedback loop is really important internally, absolutely. But if you get these wellbeing programs right, studies show actually if you're really engaged in a wellbeing program that employees actually really appreciate, you've got about 90% of your employees will be out there championing your organization to other people. And actually, you can't buy that. So when your employees are out there singing the praises of your organization, actually that, we spoke about the ripple effect earlier, you get this kind of free advertising of just how good it is to work in this environment. And that, I think, is really, really important. I think the other things that are interesting, and probably one thing that we haven't spoken about, is innovation. And actually, the studies out there show that you drive about a 30% increase in innovation through effective wellbeing programs. So all of a sudden, you're saying, right, we're going to engage staff. We're going to drive productivity through performance. The happier our workforce is, the more of that we get. And actually, they're going to be more innovative. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to deliver more, but they're also going to go out and champion us to a much broader audience, because that's what the power of it can do. Now, I think the only other thing I would say is not everyone's ready to come on the journey, right? You get lots of people that don't want to step towards a health assessment because they already know things aren't great and they don't want to be told, or they're a bit scared. You know, we've got quite a high male population within our workforce, and some of those people generally kind of, you know, are fearful of what might happen. And one of the things that we've done is when we've had people that have you know, had some interesting diagnosis or found some like non-communicable disease or gone on to something else that's needed treatment, etc., we've invited them to share their stories. And when you invite people to share their stories and they talk about the impact of that, and we've involved their families and kind of got everybody to make this really coherent story about the benefit of engaging with the process and the program, what they actually recognize is that individual looks like me. They're similar to me. I could be that person that hasn't had all of this benefit and come out of the end of it with much worse consequences. And you start to normalize things for people. And I think if you can do that element of it and normalize it and make people find their way to engage in the program, then all of these wonderful benefits that we've spoken about, that is how you translate this into the business language and to get the powers that be engaged in the topic, that's how you get all of that stuff. And I think it's like really important to start small, build on it, engage with those that want to engage, find the mechanisms to bring other people along, but don't think you've got to do it all in one go. But I think hopefully
you have to do it all by yourself.
Absolutely. But I think hopefully today you've got these like little threads of things that you can pull through and say, actually, like, I can go and have a meaningful conversation on productivity or performance or innovation or employee retention or whatever the lever is you need to pull to get engagement. There's really meaningful value in doing wellbeing well.
I think it's I agree with what you're saying. I think sometimes what we do as practitioners is that we get knocked heavily by those that have the loudest voice, and they tend to be the resistors. And actually what we should be doing is we should be following the energy and almost organically creating champions that will help that ripple effect, because people respond better to peer-to-peer engagement and learning. So actually, don't spend all of your time trying to manage the resistors. That's not me saying ignore them, because ultimately you don't want to have that bad apple that's undermining some of the stuff that's there. But really follow the energy. There will be people, even if it's one or two or three or four, who are really excited about something. Get them to spread the word and get them to, as you say, tell their story and to share and encourage other people. And that will accelerate some of the things as well. Rebecca, any parting comments from you before we go to Q&A?
I think it's been a really useful discussion, just generally for me, just to be a part of, to be honest, and kind of, you know, just for us to sort of exchange thoughts and perspectives and know how interlinked they are. So really, I'm keen to just understand from some of those that have joined us on this webinar, almost their reflections or challenges, or even maybe one thing potentially in the chat that people are thinking about sort of taking away and where they're going to put their best foot forward. You know, is it going away and looking into the data that they currently have and how that might help inform where they go next? Or is it kind of having a meaningful conversation? Or so I think even if people haven't got a question, I think that could be really useful just for us to understand in terms of almost that takeaway nugget. Or where do they think where are they enthused to direct their energy?
So there's a call to action for all of you that have joined us today. We are now at the part of the session where it's over to you. What questions do you have? But there, Rebecca's really interested in hearing or seeing in the chat, what's the one thing that you're going to take away today, or what's been valuable for you, and obviously any questions. I also think I've got a question coming from Simon, who's joined us as well. I don't know, Simon, whether you want to come off mute and ask the question yourself or share your thoughts. So some news stories this morning are reporting the Prime Minister saying that sickness benefit claimants should look for work, but he adds that a good return to work programme are important. What advice would you give the government agencies, employers and individuals to help that happen well? Well, I have some thoughts on this, but I will ask you, Rebecca, first, if you don't mind.
I missed the beginning part of it, Michelle. Can you pop it in the chat or phrase it again?
Yep.
Apologies.
Hold on a second. Let me just pop that.
Happy if you want to put it in the chat and jump to Stuart first. Apologies.
It's in the chat now. It's in the chat now. So Stuart, do you have any advice or guidance on that one?
Look, I think I would say from an IOSH perspective, the first thing we want to be doing is stopping people being off work in the first place. So I think actually, we want to be on the preventative foot, don't we, before we start chastising people that have been harmed or injured within the workplace to get back to work. So I think the Prime Minister's got a tricky job, right? And I think actually when you push things out there, right, what sounds great, getting more people working and bringing the country back to where we'd like to see those things. I think we need to really front end on the prevention. We need to really think about how we make things right for people in the workplace in the first time. And when people do go off work, rather than just bringing them back in to do the same job, we need to start to work out how we make the right amendments and changes so that we can enable people to thrive and flourish, rather than to kind of re-put them back into the same environment that caused their harm in the first place. So I think there is, mechanisms that we need to look at in terms of how do we bring back people to work in the right way to enable them to be successful. I think that's probably a fairly sensible approach, but I would really challenge that what are we doing at the preventative stage prior to those things happening.
I think I would agree. I mean, for IOM, our whole philosophy is about mitigating the risk and preventing people being off work, having to rely on the NHS or not being able to work through some form of injury or ill health through work. But I think there's also, from a pragmatic perspective, internal to organisations, it's also about making sure that your managers and your people are educated in understanding and being confident and comfortable enough to have an open conversation with someone about what's stopping them coming to work. Mm-hmm. Actually, what are the opportunities or the options for people to come to work in a safe environment? And I mean that psychologically and physically. And actually, what are the strengths that person can bring? So just because they have an injury or an illness, or might have some kind of additional need or challenge personally, physically, or psychologically, there is value that they can bring to your organisation, and having a genuine, caring style of conversation can really deliver a work plan that can be supported for people in organisations. But managers and people need to be educated to do so. And actually, it's about looking at who's not coming to work for your organisation. What is the pool that you have there, and how can you engage with them? Rebecca, we're literally at time. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just want to wrap up with everybody to say this is not difficult. This is about going back to your organisations and listening to your people. There's merit in walking the path your people are every day. So go back to the floor. Ask them what they enjoy about work, what they don't, what would they change and why, and actually what's standing in their way, and co-create and understand the language of your business and connect the human story to the numbers. And that will stand you in good stead to really drive forward the productivity, the profitability, the reducing of costs, and ultimately the well-being and the wellness of your people. Thank you so much, everyone. You will get a copy of the references that we used today, and hopefully we will hear from you all very soon. Thank you so much.